Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of DIY Money.
DIY Money.
Are we energized and fired up today, Logan?
I'm so energized and fired up because I got 3 hours of sleep last night, so that was wonderful. We did move-in day yesterday into our new home, which I will say I was not a big participant in the move-in day.
You were not a participant. I'll call you out.
No.
Logan was like, I couldn't take off work. I had to be here.
I did.
No.
I had to be here, and but we had movers and people that came and helped move all the stuff and everything like that. And my father-in-law helped, which was wonderful. But then we went back last night for a second load that we put in the truck, and, you know, we're loading it all up and everything. First of all, someone stole our outdoor patio furniture, I was like, come on.
Rude.
But you know what? They needed it more than we did. It's fine. Whatever. But that was step one. Then we get back in the car at like 8:30 at night, driving back to the new house, and we get stuck in stopped, completely parked, turn the car off, traffic for 2.5 hours.
Brutal.
So I think I went to bed last night at like midnight. The dog woke me up twice throughout the middle of the night.
Classic.
And I woke up at 5:30 like I always do. So I'm feeling great. Let's do some questions.
And you slept on an air mattress.
And I slept on an air mattress because we're moving. So
does your air mattress deflate slowly through the night?
No,
or do I just need a new
no,
one?
you need a new air mattress.
Well,
Alex.
it's like, but then you just wake up once, you put a little more air in it.
Yeah, but you're okay with sleeping on the ground. Most people are not okay with
fair.
that. Most people are like, no, I'd actually prefer being in a bed than sleeping on the ground.
I just thought that's how air mattresses work. Like, yeah, you just
broken air mattresses work that way.
I don't know if even if it's not my air mattress, I don't know if I've ever slept on an air mattress that through the night when I woke up was just as
That's a
firm.
good point. Air mattresses are like a total scam. Like, they don't actually work most of the time.
Usually.
Like, unless you get like a nice one. But no one buys a nice air mattress.
No,
because
that's
they're
not
like,
the point.
I'm going to go camping and hate my life for a weekend if they're not you. And they're like, okay, I'll buy a $20 air mattress at Walmart. And then it runs out of air.
If you're camping with an air mattress, you're already glamping.
What?
If you're camping and you take an air mattress...
Do you not? No, you have like
Are
your
you
little
kidding?
fancy blow-up pad, though. Like, you don't sleep on the ground.
No, you have like blow air into basically a small air mattress, if you think about it. But it's not like a foot thick, plush, built-in pillow. That's luxury. Anyway, glad you're here.
Thank you.
Logan's in a mood
that.
today.
No, I'm
Everyone,
ready. I'm fired up.
If you're hearing
Let's
this
go.
episode,
We're on video.
Check on me. No, okay. Let's talk about our sponsors. This episode, all episodes, brought to you by Jewel Financial. If you have a complicated situation, check us out on the web. See if we can help you. JOULE financial.com. And we need questions.
Yes.
So if you're sitting at home and you have a question, even if it's super basic, if it's something we haven't touched on in a while, we would love to talk about it. So send that in, an audio question, 1 minute or less, to podcast@DIYmoney.org. And if we use it on the show, you get a $25 Amazon gift card.
And even if it's a question we've used already, because a lot of the time you have the way you ask the question, you might get a little bit more insight than some of the questions that we've asked before. So feel free to send it in. Again, if we use it on the show, $25 Amazon gift card. And we definitely need to fill up the queue a little bit more. So
yeah, we definitely do. Okay, well, today we have a really great question from Matt. Matt, what do you got?
DIY! What's up, DIY Money? This is Matt from Mississippi calling in once again. My question today is, do you continue to put money into some savings buckets, or do you roll over that money to pay down debt? So I put about $600 into different buckets. That's emergency fund, that's Christmas, that's vacation, that's kids savings, and we're at about a 3-month emergency fund currently. The debt, we have a $9,000 auto loan at 4%, and we have a student loan, $18,000 at about 6%. I'm paying about $1,000 a month there, which is roughly $400 more than the minimum payments. Do I continue to do both until the loans are paid off, or do I take some or all of the funds that I'm saving and move it over to the debt? Thanks for the feedback. You guys have an awesome day.
I love this question. This is fantastic, and it goes to kind of the heart of what we started off the show saying is, hey, we need questions, and we don't care how basic they are or how good they are. This is really quality for the DIY money basic steps, and it's really important to make sure that you put the right steps before the other steps, right? Like you're doing the steps in order versus just jumping to paying off debt, if that's what your big goal is. So, Allie, why don't you kick us off, and then I'll go from there.
For sure. This is a great one. It's one we've touched on some before, but I'm going to take a little bit of a different angle than what we've discussed. So what he's referring to, and Matt gave a little bit more explanation in his email, so I'll kind of clue you in on that for context. So Matt saves a little bit of each paycheck for annual expenses. And I love this. You know, I'm a sucker for an escrow is what I call it, but an accrual, yeah. Basically, I know at the end of the year I'm going to spend money on Christmas. And so instead of waiting until November and panicking, I put a little bit every month. So let's pause to say, if you haven't started saving for Christmas, start saving now because it's expensive. And then you have other things that come up once a year. Maybe you have property taxes or insurance that you pay every 6 months, or you name it. Vacations goes in my escrow account. So I've trimmed down over time all of my spending and thrown it into these buckets so that I can still spend for those things, but I'm not pulling from savings per se to do that. It's almost built in to my expenses. So the first thing I would think about before you make the decision, Matt, is how much have you trimmed? Because you've got to realize that you will not get out of debt until you get serious about it. And if you still have a lot of fluff and you're going on $15,000 Europe vacations with the whole family, but you have a car debt, you have to have a moment where you hit timeout and you say, okay, is it important enough to me to be out of debt and start to build up for a car over time and pay in cash for a car before I take the kids to Europe? Now, for some people, that might be no. Europe might be a mandatory expense in your brain, in which case that might change the answer. But I would say in general, if you have enough margin built in where you're building up some of these annual expenses, there's likely some areas in your annual expenses even that you might be able to trim and get a little bit more aggressive in paying off your debts. Now, I'll also applaud you, though, Matt, because not only have you created enough margin, reduced your expenses, or increased your income enough to have some annual expenses built into the budget, which you're already crushing it for. Most Americans do not do this. You also have a little bit more that you're not just paying the minimum payments towards the debt, which I like a lot. So yes, you can't live off beans and rice when you're in your debt payoff. There is a balance to living now and living later. But remember, if you live like no one else today, you'll live like no one else tomorrow. And so there's a discipline aspect to it. Now I'll actually address your question now that I got off my high horse there. I think for me, this comes down a little bit to the rates. So in the background information you shared, you had a 3-month emergency fund. You know, I tend to err on a conservative emergency fund for security. It's just who I am. So I tend to err on maybe 6 months if I had kids. Right now, mine is about 3, but it's just me in the air mattress. So in a pinch, I'll sleep on an air mattress somewhere in my parents' basement or something, and it'll work. It's going to be great. But what I would encourage you to do is don't get so aggressive in paying off the debt that if you were to have an emergency that came up, now instead of having a 6% student loan that you've reduced, you're taking out credit card debt to get yourself through that emergency. So for me, I try not to cut that too close. I would almost get a 6-month emergency fund, reduce as much as you can in your expenses, and then attack the debt. And you can listen to some of the other episodes about snowball method or highest interest rate and what the strategy is there. But to me, it comes down to the rates. Now, if you had a 4% auto loan and a 25% credit card loan, I'd be like, forget the emergency fund, forget the vacation. That's got to go. So I think some of it has to do with what is the risk I'm taking here in shorting my emergency fund to pay off this 0% bill. Okay, that's probably not worth it. 20% bill probably is. 6%, I could kind of go either way. What say you, Logan?
Yeah, so I'm going to take it a little bit different than, because I think you answered it well from Matt's situation and maybe tapping the emergency fund. I'm going to speak strictly to like the accrual side of things, because a lot of people that are in this situation that are asking this question probably don't have an emergency fund established yet. Maybe they do, but maybe they have a very low emergency fund established. And they're trying to figure out, hey, do I set aside money each month for Christmas that I know I'm going to spend money on, or for my large insurance bill that's going to come at the end of the year, or do I try to chunk a little bit more on debt? And you got to go back to those baby steps that we talk about in DIY money, is like having your developing of the margin is first. Like, you are tracking your expenses. You are developing a budget. You're figuring out how much margin you have. And remember, when you figure out how much margin you have to include the accruals in your budget. That is part of the budgeting process. You cannot just ignore those one-time annual expenses when you're trying to figure out how much margin you have to pay towards debt, to pay towards investment, to pay towards any of that stuff in the future. You have to figure out the accruals first, because they're going to come. They're going to come in the future. And why is that important? Because if you ignore them and you say, I'll figure that out later, I'll figure out Christmas later, I'll figure out my home insurance later, that's going to go on a credit card. Like, you're going to find a way, you're going to rob Peter to pay Paul, you're going to do something in order to put that money somewhere you probably shouldn't and make a poor decision. So if you're in that situation and you're saying, I don't have a healthy emergency fund and I got to figure out to pay more on debt or to fund my accrual accounts, and I keep saying that word, but just any account that's setting aside money for big expenses over time, I would set aside the money for those big annual expenses, because that is part of your budget and it needs to be factored into each month. I'm the kind of person too, I'm going through this home process and I have to call 57 people in order to get set up my water, By the way, total side tangent, it is ridiculous that you have like a $30 charge, a $50 charge, a $40 charge to turn on all this crap. Like, just flip the switch, dude. Like, why do I need to pay $40 for this? That's total tangent. But still, I'm the person that they're like, oh, so you want us to set up the monthly payments? And I'm like, how much does it cost for annual? And they're like, oh, well, it's not really a big deal. It's just like $5 a month more to do it monthly. I'm like, yeah, $5, $60 a year? Okay, put it on annual. So I'm the kind of person that's going to set all of that stuff annually and then make sure I'm sending money to my accrual account each and every month, because you're saving money by effectively doing that, because you know you're going to pay those expenses, but it has to be still factored into the budget. It still has to be separated out, and you have to be sending it to that designated account. So if I'm you, Matt, I'm still doing my accruals. I'm still sending my money to my accrual places. The emergency fund, that's more to Allie and what she answered of like, hey, maybe you tap a little bit in the emergency fund based on how high that interest rate is. But I would really try to make sure you're setting those accruals in place so that you're not messing up and taking out debt later on in the year when you have those big expenses that you know are going to come. Now, there might be another conversation to have with your spouse to say, hey, we've been setting aside $1,000 or $1,200 for Christmas. Maybe we could back off Christmas a little bit or something along those lines. But still, I think it's very important to factor into your budget what you're going to spend on those things and set it aside each month. Then develop your margin and take all of that margin and apply it towards debt or apply it towards investment that you're building over time.
Yeah, he didn't ask about this at all, but I have one more thing I want to comment on just because it's been front of mind in my life recently, but the auto loan. So I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and this was mind-blowing to me. I talked about how I paid for my car in cash, and I was like, yeah, every month it's like I have a car payment. I put a certain amount in an account because I know that I'll buy a car. So I'm not paying a 4% interest rate or now 6-7% interest rate on a car loan every month, but I've made myself a car payment. And she looked like I had 6 heads. Like, she was mind blown. She's like, you can do that? Like, I think there's this whole idea, and I see it sometimes with some of our clients too, that we have to have a car loan because I have a car. Like, that's just how it works. But what's encouraging here is, Matt, you are balling. I mean, you're doing all the right things. You're creating margin. You're checking all these DIY steps. So I'm super confident you can get this car loan knocked out. And then what I would encourage you to do is don't take that $300 a month payment or whatever you said it is and be like, sweet, extra $300. Now let's go out to eat more. Because then when you have the next car come up, now you're changing your standard of living again. Instead, be like no one else. Put that $300 a month in a separate account or earmark it, whatever works for you, knowing that you will buy a car. And then on your next car loan, hopefully you've built enough up to pay for that car in cash or to finance it appropriately if there's a really good deal. We can talk another episode about that. But if anything, you have a larger down payment and you'll have a smaller car loan. So the goal is eventually you don't have a car loan, because then guess what? That car gets significantly cheaper if you're not putting a 4% compounding interest rate on there. So thought that was mind-blowing. Thought I would share that for people who are listening. Don't have a car loan because everyone else does. Because there's so much freedom if you can get to the point that you're ahead and you're able to pay for things in cash and have some more liquidity and more flexibility. That'll set you apart really quick.
Gosh, and we're throwing a lot of extras on there, and he didn't even ask about this, but when he talked about auto loans too, and now we have a new tax bill that says on new autos that you buy, you can get interest deductions. Do not fall in that trap. Like, don't buy a car that you shouldn't buy because you're going to get a tax benefit on it. Don't let the tax tail wag the dog. Come on. I mean, I think everybody out there knows, hey, don't buy a $60,000 car because you're going to get a tax deduction on the interest.
$2,000 off.
Just come on.
Yeah.
You know, be smart about that, and don't let that tax kind of little treat that's wagging in front of you make things happen.
Yeah. Okay, we're on our high horse, so let's end it there before we get too jazzed up. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Keep those questions coming. If you want to hear more about cars and loans and us to get back on the high horse, send a question in and we'll do it. But remember, the secret to wealth doesn't change. It's very simple. Live on less than you make, invest the rest, and do so for a very long time. Make it a great one.